My friends in Jesus Christ, through the scriptures, God speaks to us and reveals himself. As Revelation 1:3 says, "Blessed is he who reads and those who hear the words of this prophecy, and blessed are those who hear and who keep what is written in it." The Bible is divided into two parts, the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Old Testament is the sacred scripture of the Jews, telling the history of Abraham's descendants, Israel's history. The New Testament focuses on Jesus Christ. It tells the story of his birth, ministry, passion, death, resurrection, and ascension. From today, we are beginning a study series on the Gospel of Matthew, the first book of the New Testament. Matthew was one of Jesus' disciples. Matthew wrote this Gospel in Antioch of Syria around AD 50, originally in Hebrew. The story of salvation begins in the Old Testament when God chose Abraham, and it continues in the Gospel of Matthew. This clearly shows the connection between the Old and the New Testaments. The central theme of the Gospel of Matthew is that Jesus became flesh and was raised as a Jew. Although he was born in Bethlehem, he grew up in Nazareth, a town in Galilee, Palestine. Jesus began his ministry in Galilee and then traveled through Samaria and Judea, particularly Jerusalem. After completing his ministry, he celebrated the Passover with his disciples, was crucified, and rose on the third day. Matthew's Gospel is primarily addressed to his fellow Jews, which is evident from his frequent quotations from the Old Testament. Right from the first chapter, Matthew highlights prophecies concerning the coming Messiah and demonstrates how they are fulfilled in the New Testament. He quotes extensively from the Law of Moses, the prophetic books, and the Psalms of David. Chapter 1 of Matthew opens with the genealogy of Jesus, the book of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham lived around 1900 BC, David around 1000 BC, and Jesus was born around the transition from BC to AD. There is roughly a 1,000-year gap between Abraham and David, and another 1,000 years between David and Jesus. Matthew's genealogy is presented in 3 sets of 14 generations, emphasizing the continuity between the Old and New Testaments. Similarly, the Gospel of Luke also presents a genealogy of Jesus, found in Luke 3:23-38. However, there are key differences between the two accounts. Matthew's genealogy begins with Abraham and ends with Jesus, while Luke traces Jesus' ancestry backward from Jesus all the way to Adam, the first man. Matthew records 42 generations, whereas Luke lists 56. Matthew's purpose is to show that Jesus did not appear suddenly in history. Instead, he is part of God's long plan of salvation, which began after humanity's fall in the Garden of Eden. God chose Abraham to carry forward this plan. He was followed by his son Isaac and grandson Jacob. From Jacob onward, the genealogy traces the history of the judges, kings, and eventually Israel's exile. This genealogy highlights the history of God's chosen people, Israel, and serves to show that Jesus was a real historical figure, firmly rooted in history. Another notable aspect of Matthew's genealogy is the inclusion of women such as Rahab, Ruth, Bathsheba, and Tamar. Some of these women had complicated or even questionable backgrounds, yet they are part of Jesus' family line. Their presence highlights God's grace and the redemptive nature of His plan, showing that His purposes can work through all kinds of people. From this, we understand that God's plan of salvation is not limited to the Jews, but extends to the Gentiles as well, the non-Jews. Salvation is not only for the faithful, like Abraham, but also includes sinners who are equally part of God's redemptive plan. Jesus Christ came to save sinners, and this is reflected even in his genealogy, which includes people with difficult or sinful pasts. Let us now briefly look at the stories of 4 women mentioned in Jesus' genealogy. The first woman is Tamar, whose story is found in Genesis 38. Tamar was the wife of Judah's eldest son. After her husband died, Judah did not allow his younger son to marry her. In response, Tamar disguised herself as a prostitute, covering her face, and waited by the roadside. Judah did not recognize her and committed sin with her. The second woman is Rahab, whose story is recorded in Joshua 2. Before the capture of Jericho, Joshua sent 2 spies into the city, who found refuge in Rahab's house. Rahab, A prostitute protected the spies, and because of her courageous act, she and her family were spared when Jericho was destroyed. The third woman mentioned is Ruth. Ruth was a Moabite, and the origin of the Moabites is described in Genesis chapter 19. According to the story, Lot was deceived by his daughters, who made him drunk and sinned with their father. The elder daughter bore a son named Moab, and from him came the Moabites, making Ruth a Moabite. The fourth woman is Bathsheba. Her story is found in 2 Samuel chapter 11. She was very beautiful and married to Uriah the Hittite. King David wronged Uriah by having him killed and then took Bathsheba as his wife. David and Bathsheba's son was King Solomon. From these stories, we learn that we should not feel proud of our family lineage. Every family may have shortcomings, but even in Jesus' genealogy, there were imperfections. Yet these shortcomings can be redeemed through Jesus. Before we conclude, I want to emphasize, to understand these truths more clearly, it is important to read the Bible daily. Through reading, we come to know more about God and His salvation plan. We will continue this study in the next video. May God bless all of us.